What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Tuesdays with Stories, hosted by Mark Norman and Joe List, two New York stand-up comics. Usually don't have any guests on. It's usually just the two of them telling stories of the past week or stories in general, and riffing on each other, and just it's hilarious. It's a hilarious podcast. They're both professional comedians. They both recently, Mark Norman was shouted out by Jerry Seinfeld at some baseball game. There were recently episodes of the podcast where Mark Norman was talking about how they ran into each other at a club and actually had conversations and hung out and has been texting back and forth. And so to get the shout out was not necessarily surprising, but a fun addition to the story of Mark Norman's life and his career in comedy. Similar to Joe List, I mean, because the podcast is about them sharing their life. So the more you watch or listen to it, I should say, the more you kind of follow these guys through their journey. And of course, I myself found out about the podcast through Ari Shafir's podcast, Skeptic Tank, which I've been a listener of, a subscriber to since it started. And Joe List and Mark Norman, I believe they've both been on before. Joe List, I know, has toured with Ari in the past, or at least done a lot of shows with him in the past. So eventually I subscribed to Tuesdays with Stories. So not probably the past few years, maybe 3 years, I've been following the podcast. And it's kind of a mixture of, if you were to take Wayne's World and Seinfeld, the TV show, and then blend those together and then kind of squeeze the pink gelatin contents into two molds of they voice-wise, very unique voices, but also hilarious dudes, Mark Norman and Joe List. That's how the recipe, that's the breakdown. If Bert was going to do a Something's Burning on how to create a hilarious show, lightweight production-wise show, just two people. They don't need guests. They don't need anything. They're living the podcast dream, not having to book guests, just two people who have great chemistry and hilarious comedians and sense of humor. Like, it fits, like, just the speed at which they're able to throw out funny things it's like a high-paced show with a lot of neuroses, which is great because, that's one of the things that people enjoy about comedy in general, but kind of, I guess, that East Coast flavor of stand-up comedy. And it's always great when both of these guys are on other shows as well. I mean, they're just hilarious. I have yet to be able to see them live. I mean, I haven't seen stand-up comedy since Denver, but I haven't had the chance to see them open for Ari. I would have seen Joe List opens for Louis C.K. A lot of times. I don't know how much Louis is currently touring. I mean, they work with a lot of comics. They also headline themselves. Where I live, there's no comedy club that close, like L.A., which for sure, I'm sure they do shows out in L.A. all the time. But, the whole idea of going to L.A. referred to a few episodes ago this week. And I wish I lived in L.A. so I could just go. I would just be a lot closer vicinity to watching more stand-up comedy. But their show's hilarious. The show's hilarious. The show is great. I mean, it's just super simple stories told by guys that, I mean, they've both been on Ari Shafir's Storyteller show. I mean, now it's the renamed Ari Shafir's renamed Storyteller show, but they've both been on the previous version, the This Is Not Happening, which is also a show on Comedy Central, which Comedy Central basically stole from Ari. I mean, technically, I guess Ari was in charge of it for the first few years, and then they're like, "Don't go on vacation," which I think it's better. I think Ari probably that relationship ended, when a good time, I guess. Like, I think Ari's in a good place. But yeah, there's not a whole lot to say for the show. They also have a Patreon page where I believe you can watch video versions of a lot of the episodes. They do a lot of bonus episodes. I would say also that their podcast in a lot of ways is similar to Your Mom's House, where there's kind of a vernacular where if you words and catchphrases and things that are connected to the show that fans of the show could have a shorthand of, similar to Your Mom's House. But this, I mean, they're called their fans are called the Tuesgays. They're very open about, Joe List is very open about his, that he's married, but he's very open about his curiosity of like, he really has desires to experiment. I could see Joe List potentially hooking up with like a really hot trans woman, maybe like having a threesome with his wife, or if the marriage ended, I don't want that. I think they seem like a very happy couple, but I could see Joe List kind of going on an exploration of his sexuality in like Thailand or something like that. I think he'd probably, there'd be some holes that would be filled emotionally for him, I think. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, to some people, I think the show might be offensive, but to me, it's like good-natured fun. Like, it's not quite like the Skanks, like the Skank, what's Legion of Skanks podcast? Like, that's like offensive for the point of being offensive. Where these guys, I think it's just more of the flavor of East Coast comedy, where the being offensive is kind of one of the ingredients a lot of the stand-ups kind of use in the recipes, is just kind of a dash of just dark hatred for humanity. But I think it brings out a lot of flavor versus West Coast. It's kind of, they call that roasting on the West Coast a lot. That's where they channel their hatred in kind of roast material. I don't know. I'm just babbling on. But go check out, if you're looking for a funny comedy podcast, usually around an hour and a half, I think they go, give or take. Tuesdays with Stories is a no-brainer, hosted by Mark Norman and Joe List. Go watch them perform stand-up, hilarious stand-up comedians, hilarious podcasters, and just all around seem like amazing dudes. So go subscribe now. And also go subscribe to this show, which comes out daily on YouTube, IGTV, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Go buy my artwork, original paintings by myself, painted by myself, obviously. Anyway, save 10% by using coupon code INSPIRED when you check out. At Ray Taylor for me on all social media. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!